join us as we review this week's selection, The Four Imams by Muhammad Abu Zahra. And before we begin, why don't you give us share some of your thoughts with us about why anybody would be interested in reading a book about the Four Imams? Why is it relevant to us as Muslims today?
Well, Bismillah, alhamdulillah, wa salatu wassalamu ala rasulillah. I'd like to say that I enjoyed the book very greatly. And if I were to summarize the reasons that are important for buying this book or reading this book or having it translated, I would summarize them into 5 reasons. The first one is that it teaches us the wonderful tolerance in our deen, that these great scholars, they reached a level of ijtihad, of legal deduction and personal deduction, and very, very deep knowledge in the Sharia, and that in no way prevented them from respecting each other and adhering to the etiquettes of differences. And they showed us a wonderful example of how these differences in fiqh opinion are in no way a reason to breach the relations between brothers in deen. The second reason that I think this book is very, very important is that it reminds us of the wonderful, very, very rich heritage of Islamic scholarship in our deen. And hopefully the learning about these scholars, that our youth will take them as role models, and that it would revive the desire amongst the next generation of Muslims to pursue the Shari'i sciences, because there is definitely a lack of candidates for scholars, that is in the future of this ummah. And also, in addition to that, as a side note, to recognize that the scholars were great Muslims, not just in their knowledge, but in every aspect of the deen. We have a problem, in our contemporary times, that many students of knowledge, while they are very, very skilled in what they are learning, they neglect other parts of the religion, like the akhlaq, for example, the Islamic manners, or they neglect their duties to the community or to their family or something of the sort.
Yeah, I was actually very shocked, to hear that they had a recent MSA activity, I think, on the Midwest, and they were saying how the most active students in the MSA, only about 30% of them actually prayed the 5 daily prayers. So as you were saying, that there's this conflict between what they're learning and what they're doing, and then they're missing even some of the most essential qualities in that area.
Yes. So these 4 imams, they present for us a very, very comprehensive, holistic role model for what it means to be a good Muslim and what it means to be a scholar of the deen.
Yeah.
Thirdly, one of the very important things also that this book teaches us is to respect the scholars of our own time, because I think that many lay Muslims, let's call them, they lack an appreciation of how complex the Sharia is and how much dedication it takes to study the Sharia sciences, and also the sincerity of those scholars in trying to extract the law from its original sources and not to deviate from the intent of the lawgiver, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And sometimes I think when many Muslims, maybe seemingly sincere, they would hear about a particular opinion of a scholar, and they would, for example, criticize it or even mock at it. And this is something which is very, very, it is not behooving of the good Muslim, of the one who fears Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, because we are to respect our scholars, and if we do not understand their reasoning, we are still to recognize that they have a level of knowledge and wisdom which the non-scholar does not have.
Yeah. When you look at what these imams went through to learn what they did, it's not something nowadays people think they can read 1 or 2 books, and suddenly they themselves think they have some sort of authority in that matter.
Yes, exactly.
And I think that's a false sense of confidence, actually, that we're instilling, unfortunately, or that the youth are getting from somewhere, this idea that all you need to do is just, go to the Quran and Sunnah. And I mean, that's true, but, even going to the Quran itself, there is so much, knowledge to be had from the works of tafsir, and you can't even just read one tafsir and gain that sort of knowledge.
Yes, exactly. And another thing, which is actually a corollary to the 4th point, and that is that in our times, Islam is being attacked by the works of Orientalists and by the works of what I would call pretending scholars, pretending Muslim scholars. And what I mean by that is Muslims who have not gained the knowledge of the Shari'i sciences in the proper way, and they do not have an understanding of what it takes, as you mentioned, Shadtel, to reach that level of prowess in this field, and yet they go and they write papers and they make judgments based on their ignorance.
Yeah. And I hate to stop you there, but we're going to have to take a break.
Okay.
At that point. So when we come back, we'll talk a little bit about who Muhammad Abu Zahra was, and then get a little bit more into the meat of the book. And so don't go away, everyone. Join us as we take a look at Muhammad Abu Zahra when we come. Welcome back to the IBM Book Review. I'm your host, Chantal Carnes, and with me is this week's co-host, Imam Badawi. We were in the process of talking about the four Imams, the book written by Muhammad Abu Zahra. Imam, if you can finish up the point that you were mentioning in the last segment.
Yes. Simply what I meant to say was that if the common Muslim or the lay Muslim is more aware of the level of scholarship that our great scholars had attained to, they will be more in a position to defend Islam against the deviant views of the Orientalists or of pretending Muslim scholars.
Yes. That's true. And actually there was one point that a previous co-host had brought up about how it used to be in the past when you would listen to a scholar, you would also see where they got it from. Mm-hmm. And now it's reached a point where a lot of the books, especially the ones that are in English now, they don't even have any introduction, any preface. That was one difficulty I ran into with Muhammad Abu Zahra. I knew he was a scholar from Al-Azhar, but there's absolutely nothing in this book about it, and very little to be had. It's like, we're very negligent in who we take from, and very negligent to find out who they took from.
Yes, yes.
And it's unfortunately a growing trend. Almost, even if the introduction is in there, people would just skip over it, as if it didn't matter who his teachers were or what he learned. And I, for one, am kind of alarmed by that we can be so careless with knowledge about Akhirah.
Yes, absolutely.
I don't know if at this point you wanted to finish your fifth point. I know you said there were 5 reasons about the book. I'd like to give you that opportunity to give the fifth.
Oh, I think I combined 2 of them and they became 4.
Okay, that's fine then. For Muhammad Abu Zahra, what I can tell everyone, what I did learn about him, as I mentioned, he was one of the leading scholars of Al-Azhar. Now, unfortunately, I was dissatisfied with what I was able to find out, unfortunately, because I know there's more to him than that. He's referenced as being the teacher of quite a number of shuyukh. One of the ones that he's mentioned as having taught was Az-Zuhayli, which Az-Zuhayli, along with Abdul Karim Zaidan, are probably, of the contemporary still living scholars, 2 of my favorites. Az-Zuhayli wrote that book, Al-Fiqh al-Islami wa Adillatu, one of his more famous works, and he wrote Al-Tafsir al-Munir. But I think that, for one thing, kind of says a lot about him, that he was a leading scholar of Azhar, especially during a time when it used to even mean more than it does now. I mean, now it means something, but as you know, there was a time when the best shuyukh and the best scholars really they came from there. Another thing that you could really tell is in the way that he wrote this work, because if you've read other works about the Imams in English and even in Arabic, some of them are just historical treatises, but I found it was very nice the way he would go through it, where he wasn't just compiling a history, but he was making it kind of a fiqh of history, so that we could derive a certain benefit in our knowledge. Yeah, so that, unfortunately, I wish I had more that I could say about him than that. This seems to be the most famous contribution that he made in terms of literature, and the actual original Arabic work was in 4 different volumes, 1 on each Imam, and then in English they chose to combine them all 4, which actually, from my point of view, I found that was I liked that, actually, to have all 4 of them together.
Yes, I agree with you.
Them as one work. So why don't we go on to the next issue, which is discussing the book itself. Yes. What would you say was probably one of your favorite things that you liked about the book?
Well, I guess one of the things while I was reading, and I thought I have to say this about the book, is that every time I would read about an Imam, I would be so taken aback by him, so impressed. I would have a very, very deep yearning to emulate him, and I would love him, for Allah's sake, in a very, very deep way. And I would think that I could never feel about the next one in the way that I felt about the one I'm presently reading about. Yeah. And each time I would read about the next one, and I would feel the exact same feeling.
Yeah.
I agree with you that putting the four together was a wonderful idea, and I think the one thing that is the best characteristic of the book is the way he would mention the strong and distinguishing characteristics of each imam in a very positive way.
Yeah.
You know, not as if to show that, well, one of them had this view and the other one differed, and so one is better than the other. On the contrary, he made it very clear that the things that distinguish them is actually what enhanced their fiqh.
Yeah. Yeah, that's true. And actually, you know, I was amazed in the way he talked about how they dealt with each other.
Yes.
In the instances where they ran into contact. And it was surprising, you know, what really amazed me about that is that each of them had very distinct backgrounds. You have Imam Malik, who was Yemeni. You had Abu Hanifa, who was a descendant of a freed slave. You had a Shafi, who was Qurayshi. Ahmed ibn Hanbal, who was he was a pure but from a different descent in all of them. And yet still, they didn't let themselves divide themselves. You know, they didn't become divided by that, the way we tend to become divided by it now. I mean, it was really a true spirit of scholarship. Yeah, and with that, we're going to have to take another break, but when we come back, we'll continue on with our look into this work. So welcome back, everyone, to the IBM Book Review. I'm your host, Chantal Carnes, and with me is this week's co-host, Imam Badawi. We were taking a look at the work of the Four Imams by Muhammad Abu Zahra. And, Imam, why don't you give us a little bit of flavor of the way, we talked a little bit about the overall content of the way he was talking about the Imams, but give us a little bit more specifics on that, if you would.
Okay, well, there's no doubt that the highlight of the book is when he actually discusses the usul, or the original main principles of legal deduction in each madhab, or for each scholar.
Yeah.
And something that should really grab the attention of the reader is that all of the four imams had almost the exact same usul.
Yeah.
And this is something which is really, really profound and amazing in our deen, that these four great scholars, not just scholars, but geniuses in every human aspect, they took the sources of this religion and they were able to extract from it different ideas, and in most cases they came up with the same fiqh. In the major aspects of the deen and the fiqh, they agreed.
Yeah, that's true.
And then they simply branched off. You know, in the matters that branch off, they had minor differences. And so it's not to be considered that the four imams are four totally different schools of thought. No, actually, the way I like to think about it is that they are four flavors of the same type of food.
yeah, that's a good way of thinking about it, actually.
And mashallah, it tasted so good to read about them. And well, let's go through their usul, because it's very important also for the student of knowledge, or simply the lay Muslim, to know where the scholars get their information.
That's true.
The first, of course, is the book of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the Quran. And the secondary source is the Sunnah. And all of the four imams and all of the scholars of Islam unanimously agree about these being the two first sources.
Yes.
The only point of disagreement was, is the Sunnah considered an actual integral part of the Quran, or is it something that is on the side, separate from it, but at the same time clarifying its verses?
Well, and even that, I kind of tend to feel that it's more semantic.
Yes,
I mean, it didn't really affect their treatment of the Sunnah.
Absolutely. Functionally, if you read the book, you'll see that they use the Sunnah in almost the exact same way.
Yes.
And that they took from the Sunnah, the benefit that they took from the Sunnah in extracting the legal rulings from the Quran, they almost use the same exact methodology.
Yes.
The next asl, or source that they would use is the ijma', which means the consensus of the community of scholars on a particular issue at any given time. That is the time when they actually issued the ruling.
Yes.
And this is the student of knowledge is familiar with what I'm saying, because very often you'll read about the legislative status of a certain act, that it is legislated by the Quran and the Sunnah and the Ijma'.
Right, yeah.
And that is because the scholars of Islam, if they adhere to and they always do adhere to the Quran and Sunnah, if they all of them extracted from the Quran and Sunnah the same exact principle and they all agreed about it, then that obviously has a very strong authoritative strength.
Yes.
And again, all of the four Imams did use this as one of their sources.